What's up, sports fans, and welcome to the Sports Opinions podcast. I am your host, as always, Alex Cuesta. You can find me on Twitter at @_Cuesta30. Find Sports Opinions on Twitter at SportsOpinion30. And this is the 25th episode, the quarter century mark. It's ridiculous that we've even gotten this far. And I thought it would be fun to try and do something a little, not different, but back to basically like the first episode where it was me just flying solo. So today there is no guest. It is just me recording this on my lonesome, giving you the sports opinions on topics that I think are not only relevant today, but relevant in sports in general. We're going to talk about something that I've kind of hinted at a few podcasts, WNBA stuff, which I don't roll your eyes if you don't like WNBA. It is something that is relevant and can really help the sport. We're going to touch on baseball with pitching because I have a problem with that. We'll talk some Stanley Cup playoffs, and then we'll talk a little bit about LeBron in the finals. And here we go. We're going to have some fun with this one. First, I want to start off by talking about the WNBA. Like I mentioned, it's a sport that starts in the summer. If you watch some of the commercials on ESPN, they want to make you believe that summer is WNBA time, when in reality, the unfortunate truth is that the beginning of summer is an NBA finals time, and the rest of summer is MLB baseball time. WNBA is still just trying to kind of carve out their way there, and there's some problems, one big problem that I think that stops the WNBA from getting the respect that it actually deserves. It should have taken a big step with its deal with ESPN. It had a nice big deal. I don't know the exact number, but there are games on ESPN now. It's marketed on ESPN, and it should have given it a bump. But instead, we see a team like the New York Liberty, which has been pretty much a mainstay in Madison Square Garden since I've been young, now having to leave because they don't make any money off the WNBA games. Using those slots to put in a show would bring them more profit than that WNBA game, which is really sad that they're now going to have to go and try and find a new home. And this is part of the problem, that these WNBA franchises, while they have a lot of talent on them, they don't have as much notoriety and they don't make as much money. Their star athletes aren't making great amounts of money that, can compare them to their male counterparts. And one of the main reasons why is the product on the floor just isn't as watchable as what you get in the NBA. And people complain about the NBA, but the male sport just has more action. And it's just something that they need to get fixed. And I have one major solution that is going to really piss off a lot of the women's basketball purists. But one of the things they need to do is they need to lower that rim. That is the main thing they need to do. It's sitting at 10 feet, the same height as it is for the men. But the problem is there's not too many highlights that can be done on a 10-foot rim. A fast break for the 10th time in a game that finishes in a basic layup, or a person like Brittany Griner, who is supposed to be the big dunker of the WNBA, that can barely rim graze with one hand, isn't going to garner that much excitement for the general public. Yes, basketball purists and women's basketball purists enjoy watching the parts of the game where the passing is crisp, the three-point shots are very good, the fundamentals down low are, perfect, the footwork is good by the bigs, but the problem is the purists only make up a small number of the demographic that the WNBA is ultimately trying to reach. If you're trying to make money, then you need to be marketable. And I think that lowering the rim, now I've already debated with some WNBA and just women's sports purists that say that this shouldn't happen, that there's no reason why the women can't play on a 10-foot rim like the men. But let's talk about the WNBA just already in general. There is already some differences there that need to be acknowledged. Number one, the three-point line is shorter than the men's. It's closer to the key, the top of the key. So that's already a difference in the men's game that I know a lot of women have an issue with, but you have to acknowledge the fact that that's already a difference in the game. And the other difference is that the people that do the WNBA acknowledge the biological difference between the size on average of a woman's hand and the size on average of a men's hand, especially in these elite athletic sports in basketball, where the men are gigantic, so they can use a bigger ball, and that bigger ball travels down to the high school and the college level. And the same thing goes with women. The women's ball is also smaller. So they acknowledge that biological difference. It's now time to acknowledge the biological difference that grown women and elite athlete women just can't jump as high as grown elite athlete men. It's just something that you see all across. The explosiveness is different. Take one of my sport that I did, track and field. Just take the high jump, for example. These are probably the best jumpers on the planet. And there's a major difference between what a male high jumper could do and what a female high jumper could do. And it doesn't take away the accomplishments and the greatness of the great female high jumpers. It's just a biological difference that needs to be accepted and acknowledged. So keeping the rim at 10 feet just kind of hurts what exactly the women can really do on a physical level. Because just imagine if we brought that rim down to 9 feet. Yes, there will be a major adjustment. It needs to be done all across women's sports. It needs to start at the high school level, and it might be a little bit of a pain in the ass to begin with, but rims are adjustable, so shouldn't be that big of a deal. But bring it down to 9 feet. Let women start there. It has to go to the pro level now because it would be something that would help right away. But do it at that level. Do it at the college level. So the next crop of women that get up into the WNBA, they'll be able to, really be accustomed to playing on these rims. And you can also then bring the three-point line probably back again because the range will be extended. So you would get a lot of different things from bringing that rim down. One, you'd get a lot more women besides just a handful that can dunk. You would get guards. You would get your superstars, like the superstar of superstars, Maya Moore. If you brought that rim down and her athletic level is unbelievable, she could very well be the LeBron James-esque type of player in the WNBA right now if they did that. What more intimidating would there be than watching her drive down a lane and put someone on a poster? I know I would even either tune in to see that possibility or even pay to see that live. That's something that I think would be just immensely popular, and it might take a little bit, but the first time SportsCenter runs that piece of just a WNBA athlete just driving the lane and putting down a one-handed tomahawk on another girl, putting them in a poster, that would start to garner a lot more noticeability, and it would really benefit all these women that play. I just looked it up. Probably the biggest star in the WNBA game, Maya Moore, makes $45,000 a year. Let that sink in. Maya Moore, probably one of the most recognizable names in women's sports, makes $45,000 a year. That's just embarrassing. You shouldn't have your biggest star athlete making money of it's a very minimal amount of money. And it's pretty crazy, but it's just something that, actually, let me take a better look at it because I'm looking, let's see, Maya Moore's salary, yeah, $45,000 a year. And Diana Taurasi makes $49,000 a year. Like, these unbelievable athletes make just peanuts on the dollar to what they're actually putting out. And I just have to say to you basketball purists, and I get it, you don't want to see the game change. It's a game you either grew up and played and loved, or for some of the older ones, a game that you coached. And it's just something you don't want to see change. But just realize your lack of wanting to change is holding back the women that you marvel from making real money. From just not being a superstar in name, but also a superstar in getting paid for what they do. And it would also help the WNBA, the actual entity and the franchises that you enjoy watching. It would really help them because right now, just the New York situation is a sad one because the Liberty, while they've struggled a little, they shouldn't have to leave. They should be making enough money. But right now, all you have sitting in the stands is the women and young girls that play the game, that enjoy it, and a lot of your diehard fans and maybe some family members. But that's it. And the demographic that they're trying to reach is much bigger than that. They want to reach the casual fan that, drops in just to watch a game because they might see a highlight play. LeBron James is on almost every night game, not because he's, because he's just this great guy, but he's on there because people want to see what LeBron James is going to do next. They want to see how many points he's going to score, who he's going to put on a poster. They want to see Steph Curry be a maestro in this league of giants and shoot from 40 feet or whatever, something ridiculous that he does. They want to see Kevin Durant, this lanky Durantula guy, drive the lane and just be a 7-foot monster with great athleticism and dunking on everyone. They want to see these types of things. And yes, it might change the game that you love fundamentally. There might be more flash. There might be less fundamentals. But in the end, these women will end up making more money. So I just really think that this is something that would help them in the long run. And if you could start to garner more popularity and you could start to get this, the regional contracts will come as well. Where a team, you might not have to not just wait to see your team possibly be on ESPN for that game of the week. No, you can watch your New York Liberty play on the Yes Network or SNY or MSG, and all these other teams can get regional contracts, which is also a big money maker for these teams. The regional contracts plus the national contracts that the league makes that gets trickled down. So it's just something that basketball, WNBA needs to do, lower the rims, let these athletes be athletes. I can go on a diatribe about all the things in a bunch of women's sports that I dislike, but that's just for another podcast. We're focusing on the WNBA now. Again, if there was a chance that I could watch Maya Moore drive down the lane and dunk and put someone like Brittany Griner on a poster, I would definitely tune in for that possibility or go see it live. So that leads me on to another topic that I have a problem with, and it has to do with Major League Baseball. Now, in baseball, you're supposed to be seeing the best pitchers, the best hitters, and you do. You're seeing the greatest people that play the game, and you can see it when, guys from Japan come over, other countries come over that have been playing in those leagues, and they're superstars there, and they really need to make adjustments. Now, Shohei Ohtani is an outlier, that he's great, but we'll see if he cools down as people start to really get film on him and notice his tendencies as a pitcher and as a hitter. And we've already seen him slow down a little bit. He's not hitting all these bombs that he's hit. His pitching is kind of a little off. He pitches every 6th, 7th day. So it's a weird thing that they're trying to work out with him. But you just see that adjustment. But one of the things that has been annoying me, and it started a little while back, and it's really starting to annoy me now, is I'll be listening to the radio and I'll hear about a game going on, and someone on the radio will say, yeah, that pitcher had a great outing. He went 5 strong innings. And right there, I just blank out. 5 strong innings for a starting pitcher. That shouldn't be a thing. 5 strong innings shouldn't be what you want out of your starting pitcher. And it's very much an acceptable thing now. And that annoys me. There's a handful of guys now in the league that you can count on to go past 5 innings. And I think 6 innings is still short. But there's a handful of guys. You got your Max Scherzer. You've got your Luis Severino. You now have Aaron Nola, who these guys just put it together and they give you 6 to 7 innings. In terms of Max Scherzer, he just gives you 9 innings, basically. 8 to 9 innings. He's a stud. But there's a handful of guys when back in the day, the norm was you got a guy that went 6 to 7 innings. 6 was a short outing. That's why it became a quality start number, because pitchers were supposed to go 6 innings at minimum, the starting pitchers. But they would go 6 to 7, and then you'd hand it off to your bullpen. You'd maybe get one of your guys to jump in there and then a closer, and that's just the way it was. Now with the expansion of the bullpen and guys that specialize in this and specialize in that, and so many setup guys, and you have your 7th, 8th, 9th inning guy, it's become just so acceptable for starting pitchers to just pitch 5 innings. And to me, that's ridiculous, because these guys are making a lot of money and they're just pitching such a minuscule amount. And a lot of this has to do with the pitch count. You see a guy that struggles a little bit in an inning, pitches 25 pitches, 23 pitches, 20 pitches in an inning, and they're struggling, and all of a sudden, already, the pitching coach and the manager is on alert. We can't let this guy get too much over 100 pitches. 100 pitches is the number. That's when they start getting tired. And it's just, they put just this generic number that just sits there and says 100 pitches is the number, when all people are different. 100 pitches might be the number for player A, but for player B, it might be 93, 85, or for player C, it could be 110, 115. But we just get this number in our head of 100 pitches, and then boom, we need to start watching, get the bullpen ready, get this going. And it's just, and guys are now so comfortable with that 100 pitch number as pitchers too, that they try also. It's not that they're comfortable. They know this number. So I think we're seeing a lot more pitchers press to try and get these great innings. And, they have to be good for this long. And they really need to get this guy out. And they press. And then the ball's now getting thrown harder. And when guys press, the ball is thrown harder in general, but not as accurate. And we're seeing a lot of these young pitchers come in right away, just throwing 98 to 100, 96, 95. And that's almost everyone. If you're not throwing 95 plus, you're kind of screwed. But that also has to do with the fact that guys are throwing their arms out earlier and pitchers aren't pitching as much. There isn't a day anymore where you needed to mix your fastball and your changeup with a curveball and a slider, and the fastball was sitting there around 93, but the change between velocity between your fastball and your change was going from like 93 and your changeup was 81. So guys were just whiffing because that fastball looked a lot faster and that changeup looked like it was snailing. And it's just the strategy of pitching is so gone, where guys went from having 3 good pitches and a 4th pitch, where now guys have 2 good pitches and they're working on maybe getting 3, where the guys like a Max Scherzer are dinosaurs. But when they do come along, they take the league over, where a guy like Max Scherzer, he's so great right now in this generation. But you take it even into the 90s, where there were the Glavins, the Smoltz, the Randy Johnsons, the Kurt Schillings, where he would just be another very good pitcher. Because every staff seemed to have at least 1, 2 really good pitchers, and then you kind of filled it up in the end. But even the guys that filled it up were expected to go 6 innings. So it's just something to me that everything is changing. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm just getting annoyed with the 5 innings. And it's okay if you want your starting pitchers down the road, your number 4, 5 pitchers to go 5 innings, whatever, because they're just there to pick up days, and kind of those are the guys that you're trying to develop, or you're just trying to fill up a staff. But and guys don't pitch as much either. I'm not, I'm digressing a little and going off on a few tangents, but guys just don't pitch as much. I remember when I was growing up, you mostly had 4 starting pitchers. And then if those guys got tired, you had a spot starter. Guys were getting 31, 32 starts. Guys are now only getting like 24 starts. I was listening to Mike Francesa, 24, 22 starts. You're never going to see a 20-win guy again, because that's almost unrealistic. When guys are getting 24 starts, you have to assume 7 or 8 no decisions right there. You might get an 18-win guy, and that's the best you're going to get. But it's just ridiculous. Guys are now pitching less, they're throwing harder, and they're just pitching less innings. And if that's the way baseball is going, that's fine, but I will never be able to accept when 5 strong innings is considered a great outing. No, that's an average outing, and you shouldn't be an MLB starting pitcher if that is your average outing. It's just something to me that, baseball purists, and people are going to argue with me, sabermetrics says this and that, and I get it. Sabermetrics is a very good tool. It should have somewhere in baseball. But if sabermetrics is telling you that every guy is the same, 100 pitches is the number, and that 5 innings is a good outing, it would drive me nuts if they changed the quality start to a 5-inning, 2-run outing. Because even quality starts, 6 innings, 3 runs is considered a quality start. Giving up 3 runs, that's like a 4-something ERA. That's not good. It's not a very good start. If you have a guy that just gives you a quality start every outing, he's given up a good amount of runs. 3 runs is tough. It should be tough in baseball, but now where guys are just trying to go out there and throw the ball as hard as they can, it's, the ball's flying out of the park's easier, because when you hit a 98-mile-an-hour fastball in the sweet spot, it's going to travel a lot further than that 91-mile-an-hour fastball in the sweet spot. So there's just a lot of things in baseball. I don't mean to sound old and grouchy, because I do still love baseball. I enjoy watching the Yankees. The home runs are fun. Aaron Judge is a stud, and it's a product of what we're getting. But I will just never be comfortable hearing that a quality start or a great start is 5 strong innings where they gave up 1 or 2 runs. Like, stop. Stop it. It's not a great outing. It's a good outing where you had to use the bullpen, but that's where we're going when you're carrying 13 pitchers on a bullpen now. So I'm done being angry for a little bit, because I think I'm going to get a little angry a little bit later. But For now, I'm done. We're going to talk a little Stanley Cup playoffs. Right now, it's tied at 1-1 as I do this recording. The Capitals were able to steal one from Vegas. But is it really stealing when they play as bad as they do in Washington? They needed to get that one game in Vegas because if they didn't, it would spell trouble because they happen to play really bad at home. And hockey's the one sport where I think home advantage is overrated. Because hockey, it's, fans do have a big deal. And if they're going absolutely crazy, that's fine. But they're sitting behind the glass. It's not like in basketball where they're up on the court, or in baseball where they're pretty close to the sideline, or in football where there's 85 to 60,000 of them screaming, 40,000 that gets held in these. It's not as many fans in an arena, and they're kind of secluded off. So the home ice advantage is different than what you would get. Obviously, your ice, the feel of it better, but it still is completely different than other sports. So I don't think it exists as much. But as we're watching this, it kind of looks like Alexander Ovechkin is completely on a quest. He is playing with a different fervor than he ever has. His urgency is up. I think he looks more passionate on the ice, and that's not to take away and say he wasn't, but he knows that this is his chance. He knows that if he blows this one, he may never get back to this point again. This is the first time he's made it past the first round. He beat the Penguins, which was his arch nemesis. He could never get past them. He got past Sidney Crosby. He almost gave it away to the Lightning, but fought back and really, really was tough. And don't get me wrong, Holtby was a big part in that, and I'm going to talk a little more about him later. But he really fought back, and this is his chance. This is probably his one opportunity, and he needs to get this win. This is kind of where LeBron was. When LeBron was just struggling to break through for his first 5 years in the league, he wasn't able to get that championship. And then he went to the Heat for the first year, and he still wasn't able to get it. And it was just pressing. And an all-time great was unable to get to that level. And we're looking at one of the all-time great scorers ever to play the game in Alexander Ovechkin that has first time getting past the first round in the playoffs and has an opportunity to get a championship. And this would do so much for his legacy because right now he's kind of sitting at that Dan Marino level where, yes, if you watch Dan Marino play, you acknowledge his greatness. You acknowledge that he's one of the top 5 quarterbacks to ever play the game, but he will never, ever be put up in a legitimate conversation as a top 3, top 1 or 2. He's not going to be up there with the Tom Brady's and the Montanas because he doesn't have that championship under his belt. And many can argue that he maybe didn't have the great players that other players had. And that's debatable for here and there. But Ovechkin is teetering on that Marino level, at where if he doesn't get this cup, if he doesn't take this opportunity and run with it, he will be remembered as one of the greatest players of all time, one of the greatest scorers of all time, but he didn't get a championship. So there will be I remember Alexander Ovechkin, he was great, but, and no player wants to leave their legacy with he was great, but. He's fantastic, and right now his supporting cast seems to be good enough to maybe get him to the promised land. But who knows if he's actually going to get there. It's going to be a tough road for him ahead because he has a very good expansion Vegas team sitting in front of them. And this Vegas team, I don't care about, they've had some good scoring. They've had some clutch guys. They play decent defense. But I really don't care about anyone else on the Vegas team but Marc-Andre Fleury. This dude has come in fresh off of winning a cup last year and seems to have not missed a beat. He played well in the regular season. Vegas was a really good team, but in the playoffs, he has just stepped it up to a whole new level. And he seems to be one of those guys that when he gets to the playoffs, it's not too big for him. There's no lights too bright for him. There's no situation too dark for him. He does what he needs to do, and he stands on his head as much as he needs to. Yes, they dropped the game in Vegas, but that means nothing. He will let that brush off because he knows he's going to come back and put up some great performances later in the series. And that's something that you have to love. And he was picked pretty damn late in the expansion draft. I think he was like the 29th pick out of the 30 players that they got to pick in the expansion. And he may as well just end up being the best pick that they've had. They've had some guys work out. They've had Carlson, they have Marshall. I don't know how to say his last name, Masseralt. But they've had those guys play really well and really work out. But Marc-Andre Fleury has been the rock. He's the veteran. He's the grizzled veteran. He's the playoff experience guy. He's the championship experience guy. And he is really showing it. So as they try and make history, the matchup that really comes out to me, obviously Ovechkin versus Fleury. I've mentioned before that Fleury seems to be Alexander Ovechkin's kryptonite. When Fleury was on the Penguins, Ovechkin was unable to get by the Penguins, and what do you know? Fleury leaves in the expansion draft, and Ovechkin is able to get by the Penguins this season. Is that a coincidence? I tend to not think so. I tend to think that there's a reason why Ovechkin struggled but didn't lose. He ended up, playing very well and ended up getting by one of his major demons in the Penguins in the playoffs. But now he sees another familiar foe, a guy that has stonewalled him plenty of times around this time in Marc-Andre Fleury. So that competition right there is something that I'm still interested to see as we at least get 3 more games, depending on how it plays, of this Stanley Cup Finals. But also the other matchup is Holtby, the other netminder on the other side for the Capitals, who has been also playing out of his mind. He stood on his head against the Lightning to pitch 2 straight shutouts. He had the biggest highlight save so far of this Stanley Cup Finals in Game 2, where he basically stopped a game-tying open net score with just his stick for a ridiculous save, possibly the save of the year. But he needs to outplay Marc-Andre Fleury in this Finals, which is a tall task. It's like asking if Andy Dalton and the Bengals ever get to the AFC Championship against Tom Brady. That's like literally sitting there and asking Andy Dalton, who's a very good player, to outplay one of the greatest of all time in Tom Brady. It's a tall task, and that is the matchup that to me is going to define this Finals. And it is an old adage that you're as good as your goalkeeper in the playoffs. Don't tell Rangers fans that, because they've had one of the better ones in Lundqvist over the past decade. And if that old adage sat true, then they should have had a few Stanley Cups under their belt. But I digress. If that old adage hangs true, then the real matchup to watch in this Stanley Cup Finals is Holtby versus Marc-Andre Fleury. If whoever plays better out of those two will end up walking away with Lord Stanley's Cup. And this, to me, is the matchup of the Finals and one to watch for. And I'm hoping this goes to 7, because it would just be fun to watch potential history made in a Game 7. And also because Game 7s are supposed to be the funnest thing on the planet. Don't tell the NBA that, where we had 2 pretty damn awful Game 7s for the conference finals. But I'm going to go on to the NBA in actually right about now. We will start our NBA talk talking about the guy who really just has taken over the NBA since he's been there, LeBron James. He's been the biggest megastar. He walked into a league that had the likes of Kobe Bryant, that had the likes of other big-time players. Paul Pierce was still a very good player, obviously. But he came in and he's fundamentally changed a whole conference in my eyes. And this is a debate. Many people are going to tell me I'm wrong, but since I've really started focusing on basketball, since LeBron James has been in the NBA, there has been a shift. And a lot of people will say, well, he plays in the weak Eastern Conference. An Eastern Conference that not too long before him was dominated by Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan played in arguably the most difficult Eastern Conference. But it wasn't too much longer since Michael Jordan left the league that LeBron James came in. And for some reason, and you can't say that the East was weak initially, because we had great Celtics teams. We had other very good teams that when LeBron came in slowly started to either just fall apart, or players just, I think, straight up started to avoid LeBron. Nobody wants to go through LeBron James to win a championship. They just don't want to do it. They would rather go and play in the vaunted, tougher Eastern Conference that has more superstars in it than try and go through LeBron, with the exception of a guy like Kyrie, who has something to prove, or unless you are traded to an Eastern Conference team, most free agents that have the choice would choose to go West. And That's to go west to get through the Golden State Warriors, to get through the Houston Rockets, to get through the San Antonio Spurs, to get through the OKC Thunder, who all were great teams at a time. And you look at it, and yeah, one of the only players, I think one of the only superstars in his prime to come over during the LeBron era, really come over, is when Carmelo Anthony came over to the Knicks. And that's because he wanted to come to his hometown team. But if you look at it, I just have a list of players that have really went over from either stayed in the Western Conference, who knew the difficulty of the West, and stayed in there and didn't come to the East, or players that left from the East to go to the West. I'm just going to run down real quick. Earlier on, LaMarcus Aldridge leaves the Blazers to go to the Spurs, a Western Conference team. He had an opportunity to go to the quote-unquote weaker Eastern Conference and dominate the East, but instead he chose to go to the Spurs, who were a very good team, but an aging team. He probably could have went to a younger team. He could have went to a Raptors, who had two very good guards. He could have went to Washington Wizards, again, two very good guards, and been that third member of a big three there. But instead, he chose to go to an older, aging San Antonio Spurs over trying to go through and play on one of those teams to get through LeBron. And I'm going to keep on going back with every one of these players and highlight that they could have either stayed to go through LeBron, but instead chose to go to a tougher team. Jimmy Butler, who was the star of the Bulls, rose up, chose to go over to the T-Wolves. Again, Tibbs probably had something to do with that, because his old coach, Thibodeau, was now over at the Wolves. And yes, they have young talent. They have Wiggins. They have Karl Anthony Towns. They have Levine. But let's realize that he was in the East. He was on the Bulls. He was one of the teams that fought against LeBron for years, tried to get past him and couldn't. And instead of going over or staying with his team in the East or going over to another team in the East to try and be a missing piece there, he left and went to the West, which was already had the Golden State Warriors as we know them today, which had the Houston Rockets, which had OKC with Russell Westbrook. So he decided to go through, and I just mentioned, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, James Harden, CP3, and at the time, Blake Griffin was still over with the Clippers. DeAndre Jordan was still over there with the Clippers. Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, they were all still where they were. So I just gave you a handful of superstars and borderline superstars to contend through, as opposed to trying to contend through the East, which has LeBron, which has Kyrie, which has John Wall, which, is a debated. Bradley Beal's a nice scorer. You have DeRozan and Lowry. You have guys that obviously you can't compare to the guys that I just mentioned. So Jimmy Butler decided to take his superstar self out of the East and go over to the West to play for the T-Wolves. Another guy, DeAndre Jordan, who for a little while, it's argued that he was one of the better big men and on the verge of being a superstar. He had the opportunity when contract was up to leave the Clippers and go over to the East. Instead, he decided to stay in the West anyway, and he signed with the Dallas Mavericks, who had an aging Dirk Nowitzki and a older team. For some reason, I know it's his home area, but he decided to go there before getting locked in his house and staying with the Clippers, which was a weird and funny situation. But again, another player that was willing to go over to another Western team instead of going to try and go through LeBron in the East. Another player that decided, why go to the East when I don't have to? Why go through LeBron? Let me just go through a bunch of other superstars. CP3 went from the Hornets to the Clippers. He was initially supposed to go to the Lakers, another Western Conference team that was blocked by the league because the league owned the Clippers at the time. Or the Hornets. They owned the Hornets at the time. It was blocked by the league because of fair policy rule, whatever crap, which is stupid at the time. But again, he was willing to go to another Western Conference team when he could have went East. Went to the Clippers instead, a Western Conference team. And then from the Clippers, went to the Rockets when he was a free agent again. Instead, again, I know he's older, but he could have easily went to a quote-unquote easier Eastern Conference to get through and would almost, it's a guaranteed finals trip if you're a superstar in the East. Guaranteed at least Eastern Conference finals. But again, he stayed in the West. He chose to pair with other superstars in the West. I know the Rockets had Harden, an extremely good player. But again, his decision was to go to the West and get through that gauntlet of other superstars instead of trying to maybe just see LeBron come Eastern Conference Finals time. So another great player. And I even go back to James Harden. There was a times when James Harden wasn't on the Rockets. Oh, he was on the OKC Thunder. He was the sixth man on an OKC Thunder team that played against LeBron when LeBron was on the Heat, lost to LeBron with Durant, with Westbrook, two other superstars, and decided to up and leave to go and try and prove that he could be the superstar of a team. Now, he had a choice. He could have went over to the easier Eastern Conference and probably dominated the East up until the Eastern Conference Finals time when he would see a LeBron and then try and play him there. No. Why go through LeBron? Why get an easy street Eastern Conference? Why get a breeze of a playoffs when I can go and fight in the tougher West and have to see maybe Durant, maybe CP3 before CP3 joined him when he was on the Clippers, maybe the Blazers, maybe another one of these really tough teams in the West and go through that gauntlet instead of seeing LeBron. Again, avoiding LeBron James. And also, another guy who, he maybe gets a pass because of the team he joined, but again, it's just a decision-making process here. Kevin Durant. He had the opportunity to stay in OKC with Russell Westbrook, which would have been fine, or go and dominate the East. There's no question that if Durant went over to an Eastern Conference team, it doesn't matter which Eastern Conference team, he could have went to my friggin' Brooklyn Nets, and he would have made the Brooklyn Nets an automatic contender with their supporting cast. And he chose to go to the Warriors. Granted, the Warriors were already a super team. He made them a better super team. He was chasing his first title. This is obviously the easiest way, but for the sake of my argument, he could have chosen to go to the easier Eastern Conference. Hell, he could have joined the Boston Celtics before Kyrie did, and the Boston Celtics are a very good team. They're a very good franchise. They have a great coach in Brad Stevens, and he could have joined them. But instead of joining another great team, he joins the super team of the Warriors in the West, which has made the West a playground for them. But at the same time, if you look at the teams that are challenging him, they are still better than the teams he would have played in the East. And he would, again, have only had LeBron to get through in the Eastern Conference Final. But he chose to go and stay in the vaunted West and become the kings of the West on the Warriors. But it's just for the sake of the argument that he avoided LeBron. So I have now given you 6 superstars / borderline superstars that have chosen to not go to the quote-unquote easier East and went to the much more difficult and either went to or stayed in the much more difficult West to try and get past each other. I call this the LeBron effect. Because if you look at the superstars in the East, you had one in Jimmy Butler who decided to leave the East. You have Giannis Antetokounmpo, which is homegrown. You have John Wall, which is homegrown. You have a lot of these superstars, Lowry, DeRozan, homegrown guys that are homegrown superstars that seems like they're chomping at the bit to leave. They're chomping at the bit to get out of the East if they can. Again, with the exception of a Carmelo Anthony who wanted to go home, with the exception of a Kyrie Irving, which had a chip on his shoulder and wanted to prove that he can win a championship on his own and get past LeBron. Besides those guys, I really can't remember any superstars that openly said, I'm going to go to an Eastern Conference team and I'm going to win there. You had Dwayne Wade past his prime, go over to the Bulls and then come back to the Heat. But he was a homegrown guy on the Heat as a superstar. It's not like he went into the LeBron Eastern Conference. Nobody really goes into the LeBron Eastern Conference. Gordon Hayward went in and paired with Kyrie. You could maybe say he did, but it's such a small percentage of guys that walk into the East and say, yeah, I'll get past LeBron. I'll do that. I'll go through the East, get my easy regular season, run through the playoffs, and then, then I'll deal with LeBron. I'll worry about him in the finals. It's a rare number, and they go in bunches. It has to be Kyrie and Hayward going to join Al Horford, who stayed in the East from the Hawks, but going to join Al Horford and now Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Terry Rozier and Marcus Smart. They have an army. They developed an army on that Celtics team to try and beat LeBron, where LeBron is LeBron, with Kevin Love kind of helping and J.R. Smith not knowing the score. But we'll get to that in a second. But it's really just a ridiculous thing that there are players that don't stay. And they don't stay because it's the LeBron effect. And you'll never get a player to admit this, but they would much rather go into the Western Conference. If you're a great player, you would much rather go into the Western Conference, battle that gauntlet, play the second best player in the world in Kevin Durant, and probably the third best player in the world in Kawhi Leonard, and the best shooter possibly of all time in Steph Curry, you would rather go through those guys. You'd rather go through CP3. You'd rather go through James Harden, because you know in your heart of hearts as a player that you have a better chance of getting through that group. You have a better chance of getting through the Warriors as they are than you do of LeBron James on his own, basically, with a borderline star, and at this point in Kevin Love, and a team that the Brooklyn Nets could be better than, then you have a better chance of getting through all these superstars in the West than you do of just LeBron James. And that effect to me is something that can't be ignored, and a lot of people do ignore it. And it's something that to me is part of LeBron James's legacy that maybe down the road someone besides me will notice and bring up, that will be part of the man's legacy, that superstars wanted to avoid him. Nobody wanted to be on the same team as him. So it's just something that needs to be noted. I'm officially putting it out there. I've noted it before just on the sides, but I finally just went and looked out at it. And we're going to go on to another thing about LeBron James. I've said it. People have said it. We're looking at this finals and going, God, what a feat LeBron James did to bring this team, which is basically awful. This is not a good team on its face when you look at the players on it. They're old. They're not great. When you're really asking a old man Kyle Korver to play a big role, I get it. He's a great three-point shooter, but at his age, he shouldn't be playing as big of a role as he is on a championship team. But you're asking him to play such a big role, that usually spells recipes for disaster. And then we look at LeBron James, this beacon of greatness, who is just unbelievable and is getting past, the Celtics were a bunch of 20-year-olds, but they were a very well-coached team. Jason Tatum's a budding star. Al Horford's a bona fide star. He got past the Toronto Raptors, which is probably the best versions of themselves this year, and they need to blow themselves up because that team needs to be disbanded. If you can't win now, you're done. You're done. You can't get past LeBron with the team you have now. You gotta blow it up, but that's for another topic. But he got past a lot of these other teams, which seems superior to him, and he did it. He did it with a lot of difficulty, and now he almost stole game one from the Warriors, who are a much superior team, and we just look and we marvel because this team is not a championship caliber team. But wait, LeBron does this to himself. Don't have too much sympathy for the man. Yes, early on in his tenure with the Cavaliers in his first run, those teams were bad, and that was by no doing of his own. That was the GM not doing his job, and, the Cavs suffered for it because he left. But ever since, he finished up with the Heat, and even at the end of his Heat tenure, LeBron is a really smart guy. He sees the money these owners are making. He sees the money these leagues are making through these TV deals, which are in the billions. And they're massive. And then he's looking at the piece of the pie that the players are getting and the superstars like himself are getting and going, this just doesn't match up. And realizing that signing that 5, 6, 7 really long year deal, yes, it gives you security because you're making money for that long. But at the same time, as these TV deals re-up every 3 or so years, the owners are winning out when you make these long deals. Because in the beginning, that deal may have been, might have hit their pockets a little bit, but they know in 3 years that TV deal's going to reset. So it's going to do something where your contract that was big money to them is now going to end up being a lot less. And now they're lining their pockets with the money because they signed a lot of these big time players to these 5, 6, 7 year deals. And now they're making money on the back end. So LeBron wisened up and said, no, that ain't happening. I'm not going to let that happen because I'm the best player in the world. I deserve to make my money, and I deserve my money to match what you guys are doing. So because of that, being the smart guy he is, he's decided to start aligning his deals basically with when he knows the TV deals are going to be up and when they're going to be renegotiated. So because of that, he does these 2-3 year deals with a player option at the end of them, like he has this year. People are all clamoring about where he's going to go. I'm still on the record saying he is staying in Cleveland and that he's not going anywhere because this has been his plan. This is what he does. He tries to get as much money as he can out of the owners, try and get as big of a deal as he can. And then he uses his power to help his friends. And because he's such a big star, he gets other players big contracts. He gets other players paid. He gets other players that would necessarily be cut or be traded, or, just left to the market because GMs think that they can get younger, better guys like Tristan Thompson, guys like J.R. Smith. He gets his friends paid, but at what cost? He's looking at a team now that this team is so bad because of LeBron James. LeBron basically told the Cavaliers, you need to sign Tristan to a legitimate deal. Give him the highest number that you can because he deserves it because of what he did. And, they didn't want to lose LeBron, and it was basically sign him or I walk, guaranteed at the end of my deal. Sign him or I'm done. And no one wants to lose LeBron James that way, so Tristan got paid. Same thing for JR. JR got paid. So you have these three guys, one of them who's a bona fide superstar, making the max and making as much as he can every single time the TV deal's up. And then he got his friends who are borderline, J.R. Smith's a starter in the league. Tristan Thompson should be a starter, but he got paid and he kind of fell off the wayside. So he's getting his friends paid, which could have went to, they would have signed probably smaller deals if it wasn't for LeBron James, saved the team money, and the supporting cast may have ended up being a lot better because that couple million here, that $5 million there, that $7 million there really adds up to another quality player, where instead you're stuck having to sign Jeff Green, who stepped up, but Jeff Green shouldn't be on a championship team. You're signing Kyle Korver. You have to make the big trade. You signed Isaiah Thomas, which didn't work. You have to make the big trade, which ended up not working out, because you also need to make sure you're not salary strapped. They need to match up in money-wise for the NBA. So there's a lot of factors, but the bottom line is LeBron does this to himself in making all the money that he can, which I'm not going to knock him for. It's his right to make all the money he can. He earns it. He works his ass off. He deserves it. But then you see guys in other sports, and even in this league, you see a Tim Duncan taking less money to get better players. You see Tom Brady constantly doing that in New England. There's no reason why Tom Brady every year shouldn't be the highest paid player in the league, period. Definitely the highest paid quarterback in the league. But he's willing to, instead of taking that extra $4 or $5 million, $3 million a year, say no, put that towards another player that could end up helping us get another championship. So I'm not knocking LeBron. It's not a knock on him for wanting to get paid and making all the money he can. It's just a knock on him for now expecting his GMs to do their job as well as they can when you're kind of pigeonholing them by getting all the money for you and your friends and taking care of them. So, yes, the feat that he did in getting this team to a finals is great, but let's not really have so much sympathy for him. They're this bad because of him, He's not carrying this team, and this GM gave him this awful team because, the GM didn't do their job. No. LeBron played GM. LeBron is forcing this GM's hand, and he's going to force it again this year when he opts out. And now the Cavs are going to have to throw at him another max deal, which is higher than what it was when he got his initial max deal 2 years ago. So let's see what happens. I think he's going to stay. I think the Cavs are going to throw as much money at him as they can. Because he's LeBron James, you got to try and keep that type of player. But if he does leave, the franchise that he goes to is going to be happy to have him. But be ready. Be ready for him to now take your books and throw them out the window. Because he's going to do this again. And he's going to try and get his friends paid again. And you're going to do what you have to do as a franchise for LeBron James. Because nobody wants to lose LeBron James. So we're going to go on to what he's playing in right now, the NBA Finals. And they should have stolen game one. J.R. Smith had a blunder. He obviously didn't know that the game was tied. And he got a rebound over Durant. Great positioning. The ball bounced to him. He had a great rebound. Instead of resetting, trying to go back up, get fouled, maybe get a game-winning shot, get it out to someone to make a game-winning shot, any of these options, he dribbles it out like he's trying to dribble at the clock or maybe get fouled because he didn't know the situation. LeBron's screaming at him. LeBron's pissed at him. They go into overtime. They get trounced in overtime. Warriors survive. I feel sympathy for JR. JR made a stupid move. If the Cavs end up getting swept, if they end up losing in general, he's going to be the reason. He's going to get blamed. He's one of LeBron's good friends, so I don't think LeBron's going to hold a grudge. But it's going to be the everlasting play of this series. They need to win this series if they want. If JR wants it to go away, they need to win this series. Which is going to be difficult because they were underdogs to begin with. They should have stolen game one in Golden State, but they didn't. JR's, the highlight of LeBron throwing his arms out to the side while screaming at JR is going to be one of the pictures that are going to live on forever in the NBA. But let's not forget, my boy Scoopy Robinson, Brandon Scoopy Robinson, been on this program twice. He pointed out, and I read it, and it really, on Facebook, he put on a status, and it really, brought it to perspective. Everyone's blaming JR, but let's not forget, George Hill missed the second free throw. Why? If it was intentional, if he thought 4.5 seconds was too much time, or if he just flat out missed it, he missed that second free throw that would have put the Cavaliers up. Now, granted, the great shooters, the weapons that Golden State has, they may have marched down with 4.5 seconds, which is a lot of time. They would have taken the timeout. It would have been moved across half court. Kerr would have drawn up a play, and it could have very well worked. The game could have been won by Golden State anyway. But at least put your team in the chance to win. George Hill failed to do that. And no one's talking about the fact that Hill missed the free throw. Hill, I think it was a 79% shooter at the line in the playoffs at this point. Nobody's looking at that. And I like the fact that Scoop, I give you all the credit for bringing that up. Thank you for bringing that up to my eyes, because it's true. He missed. And now, because of JR's blunder, no one's really realizing that George Hill blew the game too. He should have made that. That is a free throw. They are freebies. It's a lot of pressure, but you have to make that, George Hill. That is your job, being there. You make that shot. You go up by one. You play defense. You try and force a miss. That's how you play. No, instead he misses. J.R. Smith makes his mistake. LeBron is seen screaming at J.R., getting frustrated. They lose in overtime, and J.R. is going to get all the blame. Not here. J.R. is from right near where my area is. I grew up in Manchester. J.R. is from Lakewood, New Jersey. JR, I got your back. You made a dumb play, but at the same time, it wasn't all on you. George Hill, you need to make that shot. JR, you need to know where you're at. You need to know the score. You need to know the time. But the free throw's got to be made there. It's a freebie. You're in the finals. You cannot miss that shot. And it really puts a damper on the fact that LeBron played probably the greatest playoff game of his career in a loss. And he's going to have to do some more Herculean stuff like that. If they want to win this series, they got to try and steal the game on Sunday, which I hate saying the fact that the game happened last night, which was 2 nights ago, Thursday, and they're going to play on Sunday. Why are they getting so much rest? That doesn't help. It helps get them healthy, but it draws it out so long, and the playoffs are supposed to be a gauntlet, giving them 3 days rest from... They played on Thursday, at Friday, Saturday, giving them 2 days rest when they're staying in Oakland. It's not like they're even traveling. They're staying in Oakland. Giving them 2 days rest is stupid. It's not a gauntlet anymore. It now just becomes a break. They play a harder schedule in the regular season. Do something about this. Make it a 1 day rest again in between. 2 days is too damn long. It draws it out. I get it. You're trying to make as much money as you can in the NBA. You're trying to draw out the season as long as you can so you become a 365-day-a-year league so that right away this goes to draft talk and off-season move talk. But it's just so tiring that the NBA, if Golden State sweeps, they'll end up sweeping by Friday. That's stupid that it started on Thursday and we're going to get through 4 games by Friday. Way too long. Way too long. Now, let's talk. We got to talk about the rest of the playoffs as it is. Golden State is vulnerable. They are a vulnerable team. Everyone's talked about how they look apathetic, and they kind of do. They look apathetic, and I think it's just, Kevin Durant's the leader of this team. He got his championship last year, but what has it done to the chemistry of this Golden State Warriors team? He's the unbridled leader. He is the guy. Steph Curry is the other superstar now. He's the 1A. Klay Thompson's just a shooter now. And Draymond's just a glue guy. Where before Kevin Durant came over, it was really those three working really hard together. It was the Splash Brothers. It was Steph Curry and Klay Thompson both going off. It was Draymond also contributing in terms of scoring and doing all those defensive plays. It was a lot more involvement from those three, where now, with Durant being there, there's much less actual involvement from Draymond in a lot of ways. There's much less involvement from Klay. Steph doesn't have the ball in his hands as often as he does. So, and we've seen that Kevin Durant, he couldn't get it done with another superstar in Russell Westbrook, and when they had James Harden on the bench in OKC, and he was the leader of that team. As much as it was kind of butting heads with Russell Westbrook and who was the leader there. He was the leader, and he couldn't get it done in OKC. And it seems that right now, last year, it might have just been the whole entire push of this brand new superstar team. But this year, we're seeing KD. Is he able to be the leader that this team needs? There's no reason why Golden State should have even been in the situation to go to overtime. I understand LeBron's greatness. LeBron is great, but there's no reason why that game should have been that close. There's no reason why 4 games in this series should be that close. This should be 20-point wins every game. There should be no chance that the Cavaliers hang around. And if they don't come out in game 2 and just blitz the Cavaliers, then LeBron James is winning this title. Bottom line. If Golden State doesn't come out and dominate in game 2, put him up 2-0, and send a message to LeBron, send a message to the league that, listen, we've been kind of being lazy through the playoffs, but we're here, we're back, we're going to do this. If there's even a chance, if they win another squeaker, if they go up 2-0, but it's another squeaker, LeBron's going to hold serve at home. Cavaliers are going to win both games at home, and they will take 1 out of 2 in Golden State to win this championship. Mark my words. If Golden State does not make a statement game in game 2, LeBron James secures another championship right here, right now. So, and that was my prediction. My prediction was I had Cleveland playing OKC, which now looking at it is ridiculous. But I had Cleveland playing OKC and winning, I believe, in 7. I'm sticking by that prediction. Cavaliers are going to get a championship. Watching this version of Golden State, when me and Scoop talked and did our predictions back then, we both acknowledged that Golden State's a vulnerable team. They battled injuries, and they're just not playing as well as they did chemistry-wise. They're a vulnerable team, and they can lose. And we both acknowledge that LeBron's greatness is going to be what drives this team. And we've seen LeBron's greatness throughout the playoffs, driving the Cavs to wins. And I'm still sticking by the Cavaliers in 7. They're going to steal Game 7 in Golden State. They will hold serve at home. Golden State will hold serve at home, as apathetic as they will play, and it will come back to bite them in the ass in Game 7, where they will pull what they did against Houston Rockets in Game 7. Houston Rockets should be in this championship. 27 straight misses from 3 are what lost them that. The fact that CP3 wasn't there to right the ship, the fact that no one decided to drive to the rim is what lost Houston that game. Golden State did very little to win Game 7. Houston handed them that Game 7 in the Western Conference Finals. And right now, they came out and they played the same exact way. And they should have lost in Game 1. LeBron may steal Game 2. If he steals Game 2, then you might be looking at LeBron in 5. And I'm not even kidding. People are going to laugh at that. But we are talking up Golden State's greatness. And this is something that if you want to compare anyone to Michael, compare this Golden State team to Michael's Bulls teams. Because let me tell you, Michael never took his foot off anyone's throat. Yeah, he went to 6 a few times in championships and in playoff rounds. But it wasn't because the Bulls were apathetic and they didn't look good. And if you want to compare a team to anyone, compare the Warriors to the Bulls. That is the two teams. Stop comparing Michael to LeBron. Yes, the greatness, the dominance of the leagues at the time are there, but that comparison needs to be squashed because LeBron has never, ever, ever had the teams that Michael had. We could talk about the big 3 with Wade and Bosh. We could talk about Kyrie coming to him. Wade is probably the closest to whatever Pippen was, but Wade is not Scottie Pippen. Wade is not a top 50 player of all time. Scottie Pippen is a top 50 player in the history of the game. And it proved to show that he won 55 games when Michael retired. He went to the Trailblazers and made them a Western Conference contender. Got to a Western Conference championship when he left the Bulls. Pippen's legit. And those Bulls teams were legit and they were loaded. They were loaded like this Warriors team is loaded. And Michael Jordan be damned if he ever let any of his players play the way that the Warriors are playing. So let's not let the Warriors off here. Let's compare them to those Bulls teams because they would never have been in the situation that the Warriors had themselves in Western Conference Finals Game 7 and have themselves now. Michael would have stepped on somebody's throat. Durant needs to channel that Michael. He needs to grab someone by the collar. One of those superstars, and whether it's Clay, whether it's Kevin Durant, whether it's Curry, whether it's Draymond, grab the other guys by the collar and say, listen, you little shits, this ain't happening. We are much better. We're not going to underestimate anyone on that team. They're all NBA players. We're going to come out there, we're going to play our ass off, and we're going to dominate. They don't do that in game 2. This series is over. Stop comparing Michael to LeBron. Start comparing the Bulls to the Warriors. Let's stop giving the Warriors a pass and stop calling them an all-time great team. Because right now, they're just looking like a group of all-stars that can't play together. So again, my prediction, I still stick to Cavs in 7, but it could be quicker, and LeBron could have a championship quicker if Golden State doesn't come out and do what they have to do. So with that, thank you for listening to the 25th, the quarter century episode of the Sports Opinions podcast. I went solo. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I'm your host, Alex Cuesta. Find me on Twitter at @_Cuesta30. Find Sports Opinions on Twitter at SportsOpinion30. And thank you for listening to this. If you were listening probably either through iTunes, Google Play Music, Spreaker, YouTube, and yes, I'm on iHeartRadio now. Please go subscribe if you haven't already. And if you enjoyed what you heard, go tell your friends. Tell your friends to listen to Sports Opinions podcast. Even if they just skip around and take the excerpts that they want to listen to on the subjects they want to listen to. It would be great just to have them listen and then come and comment. Give me your opinions. Let me know what you think about my opinions. Let me know what you think about sports in general. Tell me if I'm an idiot. Tell me if I'm completely right. Tell me if you have a different view. I want to hear it all. So contact me in whichever way you can, either on either one of those Twitter accounts. I'm always welcome. Come follow those, send me a message, or even just tweet at me. It will be great to hear from you. But again, thank you for listening to the Sports Opinions podcast. It was great doing it, 25 episodes deep. I hope to reach 2,500 more, and I'm hoping that this grows and I continue to have fun doing what I do. Thanks again for listening. Have a good one.